Delete, delete, delete.
Delete, 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 delete!
The FCC's chairman wants to delete a whole lot of regulations, and he published this notice asking for public input about what exactly should be deleted. There's a whole lot of politics surrounding the whole thing, and one thing that jumped off the page in the FCC's press release was the idea of prosperity through deregulation. I know for me, sometimes I wonder, prosperity for who? I'm a licensed amateur radio operator, and you are too, but Dad, you've also been in broadcast media, and you've been dealing with the FCC and regulations for your whole career. Why is the FCC asking for comments from everyone and not just like radio and TV people?
Well, you have to think first about what all the FCC covers, which is an amazing amount of things, like all frequencies. So you got everybody from AM, FM, TV, cellular, space, X, shots, everything's going on. So now they're talking about experimental frequencies at 95 gigahertz, which I don't know if I want to be exposed to that, but it's mind-boggling to read the rules. It's mind-boggling. If you ever want to do that, or Day, I can show you some stuff. It's just mind-boggling what they've had to get involved with. But it's played a key role in the rollout of every RF service, right? And without, they're the master coordinator. They're the people who make sure that when I key up my radio on ham frequencies, it won't be some digital stuff washing out the whole thing, or when I'm tuning in my FM radio, I'm going to get FM radio only. So it's super important to have the regulations. People understand that you need some regulation, and it always becomes the question of how much and who gets the input. So right now they're saying public input, but truthfully, like the people with the biggest coordinated efforts, money, the big organizations, they're going to have that great influence, but politics will have no influence here.
Of course.
Their decisions control a lot of money, because if they create a new service called cellular, for instance, and it's created by certain specs that certain people wrote, they're going to have the inside track to get it going and investing in it and so forth. So it's hard that the pressure comes from lobbyists. You got to assume all of that stuff happens. So when we're talking about delete, 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 most of us like to have less onerous burdens on how we do things. So, but we do want all of our stuff to work. So I know I had the example where calling 911, the FCC gets involved with that because all the communications that have to happen, right? So Congress can write a fairly vague law, and the FCC has to implement it. And then businesses challenge it, and so the FCC rules have to get more and more detailed so that everybody knows what they have to do. So that it just creates a mess, and you can see it in real time live by looking that up on the internet, the FCC rules, Part 47, and so forth. So, and a lot of it, when Congress makes a law and they say it's the FCC must put it in, then the FCC has to address it. But if it's not really there, you can administratively create a lot of rules because people are coming to you with questions, or industries are coming to you with their woes. Like broadcast industry did that. It's like, oh, we must own many stations in a market now, and so forth. So though all of that works together to give us puts us where we're at.
So getting back to delete, 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 what kind of regulations do you think we should start looking at in there?
Well, radio, they were deregulating radio back in the Reagan era. They started doing some things, and over years, they started, you can own more than one station in a market. You can now you get rid of your home studios. So if you're licensed to St. Louis, you don't have to have a studio here. Like all these kinds of rules that have been taken off to take off the burden off of the stations. It takes a lot of burden off the owners. I'm not sure that it helps local radio. That's the one thing, if you look back at it and you go, wow, of all these rules we've done to deregulate radio, has it really helped the local radio people?
And there's a lot of burdensome regulations that they've taken off, which are helpful in terms of even local people, like having to do a lot of the little manual slave labor.
Like at one time you had to be a licensed radio engineer. What do they call the first class, second class, third class licenses? And each one could do certain things at a broadcast facility. So that changed over the years to become a general licensed person, to then the FCC basically saying the owners would want to have some technically competent people doing the work, and then the owners are required to comply, so they'll hire someone to be a chief operator instead of a chief engineer. Really, you had a chief operator. And so those rules helped, and the amount of times you had to check your frequency, the amount of times you had to check your station, you had to create transmitter readings every few hours. All these things, technology took out some of them from being necessary, and so on and so forth. It takes a while for the commission to get to them, but they have done that in the past. They have a history of that without having a delete memo.
Well, it's funny too, like both of us are dads, and both of us have, well, you've raised kids all the way through to like college and beyond. I haven't done that yet. But you notice like as your family life goes on, you keep adding little rules because the kids always find ways around them. But then you realize at some point, as your kids start getting a little wiser and smarter, like you can give them the end goal instead of the actual individual rules. So the question is, how far can the government go? Because corporations are kind of like kids; they're always going to find ways to bend things.
Yeah.
So finding that balance is the tough part.
I think that creates a lot of the thinking of the entities, the large entities. They're always thinking of ways to increase their revenue, even reduce competition is another one where you can do through regulation. You can regulate, like if you wanted to own something like you just could look at the rules, some of the things. You want to start yourself a carrier for phone calls, or you want to become a radio
local ISP.
Your local ISP. The rules alone, it almost requires you to have a degree in something or have lawyers on staff or somebody you can call about all of that. There's a big barrier to entry for a lot of this, and I'm not sure how much of that. It'd be great to see a lot of that go away and let more innovation enter those areas. You don't want that in your plane to ground communications, however. So again, the FCC, the rules are there. They're great. We need them. There's not a question that you need rules. It's a question of which ones are outdated, and I hope people focus on that here, which ones are outdated or there's a technical solution. In our ham friends, I didn't say to you guys, I've seen in the blog posts and things where people are talking about this old rule because now we could do this differently, but the rule still says that and the other. So this is the chance to kind of improve some of those situations. The ARRL and others will be putting their comments in. But again, everyone gets comments. I have no idea how they're going to go through that many. Maybe they'll use AI. I don't know.
Put Grok on it or something. Oh goodness. You talked about like the restrictive thing that kind of prevents innovation. For me, like the rules and fees around broadcast radio, like FM and AM stations, means it's hard for like a local individual. Like let's say I saved up some money and I was like, I want to build this local media thing to help local high schools, local colleges, that kind of thing, and kind of build up the community. The price to just get started with a very small signal is so high that you would have to already have some wealth to do that. It seems like a long time ago, when I was a kid, I remember there were so many local stations. They had local music artists. They had local shows that some of them were quirky and dumb, but it was like that's where you get the next whatever, the next announcer or something that's not just in the Hollywood system or in the radio industry. So, like here in St. Louis, we even lost KDHX, which was one of the last stalwart independent. It was weird. It was crazy. It had just everything all over the spectrum, but it's gone. Like all that history, all the local artists and things that came out of that, it's all gone. And I think it's a little sad. And some people say like, oh, well, that's because we're moving to the internet and streaming radio. But could also some of these regulations have brought that downfall because all of a sudden when a company can own 800 radio stations and consolidate everything and they have like psychologists working on the way that their station plays and people default to that because the signal's better,
It's tough. Competing a small guy, it's always tough for a small guy to compete in a big pond or whatever. But the help. The thing I would say with radio right now, it is getting, when I started, there was like radio and television, and your entertainment revolved around that, and then you had to buy entertainment, you had to buy records, you had to buy CDs eventually, and so forth. So
Which
now,
I still do, because streaming services are just terrible nowadays.
Yeah, and I got my $5 rule, so I have $5 or less in DVDs. But anyway, but the issue, the smaller guys, the money really caused a lot of that. There was a lot of money became available in broadcast radio over those decades of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and then I think that the rule where they could have more than one station, the promise was that they could keep them all healthy. and they started overpaying, right? So that's not a government rule, it's not a regulation, but regulations created the environment where people were overpaying for stations, and then 5-10 years later, they're sucking the life out of the station to try to pay off the debt, right? And in Clear Channel, you're hearing me there, I think. Is that still around? But anyway, but that's happened. We've seen it like 3 or 4 times happen, and radio itself became weaker. So then the competition comes in from the internet, and you got a weakened set of industry set of stations and so forth. But that local guy, it's still fun, and there's a lot of people in their minds that could make a great station. But making a great station and paying the bills, that's the whole game, right? You want to make it a feasible operation.
If you were going to submit some feedback to the FCC, what kind of rules would you delete? Have you had a read through all of the rules in the FCC's database?
Yeah, well, I've read through quite a few over the years, and then they've changed. And there are some. Again, it's like we have cameras and internet connections at tower sites, so physically visiting a tower site, taking sets of readings when you're 99% sure they're right. There's a lot of technical things that I would feel comfortable if they changed them. Like how often do you have to prove that your antenna system is compliant? Is it once a year, once a decade? Somewhere in between there is probably reasonable. But again, feedback and more people than just me. You have other engineers who are doing some great stuff out there that can check it out. So the FCC has been taking comments from anyone, as far as I know, as far as I can remember. You could send them a comment, ask for you. It used to be harder and more official and letters, and a lot of communications might have had to go through legal. But you have to then make a lot of assumptions about how well you're listened to and what could be acted on.
Yeah,
and so
are they
forth.
only going to listen to the political things that they care about, or will they listen to everybody like they say they are?
Yeah, well, they're a big organization, so they have an inside world that we don't know exactly about, but they've been pretty good so far. But it's gotten so big. The FCC's things, just because of the growth of technology, has gotten so big. It reminds me of the Disney flowchart I saw a few years ago, which was just phenomenally too large for one company, I think. It's like, that is crazy. But anyway, and then you got to ask yourself, can one agency do a good job in covering that diverse type of service that's included in their mandate, really? And it's just like their control of all frequencies. Mm-hmm. You get into there, it's like, well, could they control light? Like they kind of do. We got the fiber optics going, right? Mm-hmm. So you kind of have light in there. So in organized groups are going to get the most input. I would say that's by nature, because they're organized, and they're going to have their people in their organization, and they have friends and so forth to be all in there.
They'll have people analyzing all the submissions and then replying to them.
Yeah,
which I don't have time to read.
And larger companies will hire great consultants that are very known in the industry, and they'll all put their input in there. And so and broadcast owners, of course, are the number one thing they'll have on is asking to save AM radio. Not, but it will have. They will ask for unlimited ownership and try to get rid of any rules that could eliminate cross ownership. They used to have radio, TV, newspaper, and they made rules like you can't own the radio, TV, and newspaper in a town.
You mean like there would be a rule that you can't own every single piece of media that somebody consumes throughout an entire lifetime?
Yes, that would be the case. But if you change the rules wrong, you could get the Googles or Apples buying media companies and having their online world merge with the TV, merged with news operations and so forth. So
which it seems like they're already doing. Some
you want to, because
at least with the aggregation,
it feels so efficient, right?
Yeah,
you have less people doing the reporting. You don't need 12 reporters to show up at a press conference for the St. Louis Cardinals opening day. You only need one. So anyway, hopefully. Nothing will get silly like that. And again, if you keep the politics out of it and think about the broader implications. And ham radio, it seems safe to me. It's all volunteers, so there's nobody making $1 billion if they change a rule in ham radio. And there are the hams that want more freedom to experiment, and there's experimental areas. So anyway, we'll see what happens in there. But the cell sites, military, SpaceX, and others, they'll be wanting all the new services, right, to put their shiny new toys on, or their new thoughtful things, and a new camera up there that needs the 8K video. Some of that will be fun. Some of it will not be fun.
So if you want to find out more about this thing, check out the links in the description. And if you're crazy enough to spend time studying FCC regulations and you want to make a statement, the deadline for that is April 11, and the deadline for public replies is April 28. We'll see if anything comes from this, but for now, we'll get to some other fun projects like installing this GPS antenna and building a few new mini racks.
And I have to go take a set of readings. I don't.